yeah, please do ask questions because I'm here to help essentially. So if there's anything, please just interrupt me and I'll do my best to answer you. So thank you everyone for making it possible, and thank you all for coming. This is my first time ever talking about my work in terms of street photography, so very exciting for me. Just in terms of some of the things that we're going to cover today, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of my background, because I've got quite an unconventional background for someone that is doing photography full time. I haven't gone the kind of classic route. I'll then talk through some of my favourite images that maybe have some lessons or some stories attached to them, and we'll run through those, and we'll try and go through those fairly quickly. Then I will look to talk through some tips and tricks in terms of street photography, so kind of 11 steps that I think are really important for anyone starting out in street photography, or even people that are more experienced, because I know certainly I pick up bad habits, and it's really important to remind yourself of those things moving forward. And then we'll end up with a Q&A session at the end, but by all means interrupt me if I'm bumbling on at any point, and feel free to ask any questions. So in terms of my background, I've had no formal education or training in photography whatsoever. I've never done a course. Sorry, I've never done a class.
It's all right.
Everything I know has been learned through trial and a lot of error. Watching YouTube tutorials, as cheesy as that sounds, reading books, looking at photographs by the masters, everything I know has come through doing that. And the best way to learn really is by doing and making mistakes and learning quickly from them. So I studied economics and finance at university, so completely non-creative. I then went to work in the city for nearly a decade, again in a desk job that was completely non-creative. And I got to the stage around a year and a half ago where I was feeling a little bit unfulfilled with what I was doing, because you all know as creative people, the need to create kind of almost overrides everything else in your life. If you're a photographer, you have to go and take photos, and you have to have an outlet for that creativity. And in my job, I didn't have that outlet at all. I mean, yes, I could do my hobbies, but I wanted something to be a bigger part of my life, and that ended up being photography. So what I wanted to do was I thought long and hard about how I could kind of mix the creative side of my life with the professional one, and maybe try and turn a passion into a new career, because I didn't want to be 50 years old and have just worked in the city, because I'll probably be dead before I was 50. But around this time I started looking for other things to do in photography, because I'd mainly be shooting architecture and landscape, and to be honest I got a little bit bored and uninspired by it. And I was looking for a new challenge, and that new challenge happened to be street photography, because it was completely out of my comfort zone. I've never done it before. I didn't know anything really about street photography, but I really liked the photos, and I was really inspired by some of the works of Saul Leiter, Ernst, Haas, Herzog, Ernst, and I thought, I might as well give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? So in August last year, I started street photography as a complete novice. I'd never even tried it before. My first attempt was a dreadful experience. I was incredibly nervous. I got shouted at by someone, and my photos were, they were dreadful. And I was pretty sure at that moment that I would probably never do street photography again, but something within me kind of compelled me to get back out there and try and do it. Roll forward kind of 9 months, I've now left the city behind, and I'm now a full-time photographer, which I never thought I would say. In terms of what I do now, my day-to-day is I obviously do my personal work, which is street photography, which is what I'm best known for. I also do commercial and editorial photography for brands and organisations. I also do, so I guess the in vogue phrase is content creation. I also do content strategy, so that's helping brands and organisations communicate and connect with their target demographics and communicate key messages, which I think is really important, because there's no point producing the content if you don't have a good strategy behind it. So I think the two are kind of one and the same, really. I do street photography workshops, So I teach people on a one-to-one basis, but I also do group workshops in London every month with a colleague of mine called Craig Whitehead, whose alias is 6 Street Under, for those of you that are prolific on Instagram. Craig's a very talented photographer from Cambridge, and again, he just specialises in street. He moved over to doing street full-time at a similar time that I did, so we have a kind of camaraderie, which is great. And then, other than workshops, I also sell fine art prints as well. So I never thought that teaching or selling prints would ever be a feature in my life, but those are the two things I really, really enjoy doing most. Teaching is great, and selling fine art prints, bringing your images to life is one of the best things that you can do as a photographer. So I sell prints to individuals, collectors and investors all around the world, which is great fun. So that's a little bit about my background. Again, self-taught. Everything I know has been through trial and a lot of error. And I think it's now's a good time to look at some images. So now, first image. I guess I want to start with this image because it's probably where it all started for me, really, because I started street photography, and when you first start photographing the streets, it's quite a scary thing, and you don't really have a good handle or idea on what your style or what your kind of consistent aesthetic is going to be. And when I first started, I was shooting with like a 35mm lens. I was just kind of shooting people walking down the street, doing nothing in particular. I wasn't really going to set the world alight with those kind of photos. I didn't really have the eye for the juxtaposition or the humour type of street photography. But I think that was what I was chasing in the early days, and I didn't really connect with the images that I was producing, so I struggled. And I was watching a video on YouTube by Ted Forbes, The Art of Photography, who many of you may know, and he was introducing the work of a gentleman by the name of Saul Leiter. And I was looking at the images, and I thought, wow, this is what I want to create, this kind of thing, but in my own style, imposing myself on those images. And I started studying Saul Leiter and his work and his approach, and I noticed that convention within street photography is generally to use a 28, a 35 or a 50mm lens. And Saul Leiter completely broke that convention by using short telephoto prime lenses. So he would be using anything from like 70 up to 140 for street photography. Now, to most people that's completely insane using a lens that long. I mean, it's like a portrait lens, isn't it? That kind of focal length. But the thing I really liked is that he was able to bring multiple layers and elements together in one frame. He shot very often in portrait, like this image. And I felt really inspired to kind of create images in my own style, but with that kind of inspiration driving. So this image is the first image that I pretty much ever took with that portrait lens, and it has a special place in my heart because it's the moment where I realised where I want to be and what kind of direction I want to go with my photography. I don't do a lot of black and white nowadays, apart from one personal project that I'm working on. The reason it is in black and white is because, one, it was a bit of a technical horror show. Two, I didn't really have an appreciation of colour like I do now, and the colours just didn't look right. And I felt that it was maybe detracting from the story and the image. So the character has a kind of timeless look and feel, and people always ask me, do you go for a timeless aesthetic in your images? And the answer is always no. I never seek out to make timeless images. If someone's got a mobile phone in there, then that's great. The image should stand on its own 2 feet. It doesn't matter about whether it's timeless or not. You'll see that the focus is all over the shot on this particular one. And a little backstory, this image was taken on the day that La La Land was wrongly named as the winner of an award. I think it was the Oscars or the Golden Globes. Does anyone know? And you'll see that the only sharp part of the image, actually, it looks sharp when you print it, is La La Land. And the theatre, this was taken at the Picture House Theatre in London, just off Piccadilly Circus. And it was taken on the day that award was wrongly named. So there's a little bit of a backstory there. And there's lots of different elements to it. I mean, there's obviously someone walking in the foreground who had no idea why. I mean, she thought I was crazy photographing the window so closely. You've then got the text here, which is actually a reflection off a billboard outside. You've then got the character, and then you've got this kind of anchor point of a sign behind, and there's also a face up there, which still to this day I have no idea how that got there or where it's come from. So it's the unexpected surprises you get. But I like combining multiple elements within one frame. And it looks quite simple at first glance, but when you look a little bit deeper, there is a certain level of complexity there. And it's an image that has a special place in my heart because it's where it kind of started for me, that kind of longer use of a focal length, which we can talk about later. Next image, you probably see this one's actually in focus, and this is taken at the Moor London Riverside near Tower Bridge. I don't generally walk to particular places looking for shots, so I knew that the light is good here at certain times of day when there's no clouds in the sky. And I knew that at 1 o'clock the light would be like this and it would be a good scene, but I always assumed that it'd be too busy, people would be getting their lunch, it's a busy area, I didn't think there would be a good opportunity for photos. So I was showing a friend of mine, Rob McCarthy from New York, he's known as Ron Rob on Instagram, very, very talented photographer. I was showing him around London for the day. And we walked into this area, and when you're walking around the streets, you kind of get like a gut feeling that there's a good photo around. I can't quite describe it. You can almost, Alex Webb says that you can just smell a good photo. And I knew that there was an opportunity for a good photo here. And I probably took 30 to 40 images working the scene. And I had some nice images of like one person kind of walking through, someone pointing, someone with kind of face kind of half in, half out, the shadows and stuff. But for me, there's got to be something that takes it to another level, because anyone can do that, just get someone walking through there. There's nothing really special or unique about it. And I was stood, here, with my lens shooting down, and I remember the guy coming to the left of me, and I thought, he looks like quite a cool character, maybe we can do something here. Just to the right here, there was a revolving door, and I noticed, just to my luck, there was a guy wearing almost identical outfit. And I kind of was praying that the timing would kind of match up so that the legs would kind of be at the right moment. Maybe it would be better if there were 3 people dressed identically, but you can't have everything. And I just waited for the moment that they kind of converged but weren't touching. And I'm not sure if it could be easily replicated, but I feel that because you have the 2 characters, the relationship between them, there's a certain uniqueness there. Whenever I'm working a scene, I always want to go over and above just the kind of basic kind of person walking through light kind of stuff, because anyone can do that, it's not special. You need some other elements that take it to another level, and this guy's actually glancing at a third person that's here. And if you go to my friend Rob's Instagram, you can ask me afterwards, you can see his shot with the third person over here, which is also quite cool as well. So that's and one thing I would recommend is when you're walking around the streets of London, if you don't know where to start, try and just look for a good scene and then visualise what could potentially be happening there. So here was lunchtime, people coming in and out with their lunch, and you knew that you were going to get people crossing the scene. It was just a matter of time before something interesting was going to happen. And if it meant staying there an hour, if security weren't going to be on my back about it, then I would have stayed there an hour to work the scene until I got something. And if I didn't get something that day, I'll go back to the next day. I'll go back the next day. There's some places I've been 60, 70 times and I still haven't got what I'm happy with. So that's the kind of sad perseverance that sometimes it takes to get a good shot. This was 4 minutes after getting there and took the shot. And it's a bit like, with some street photos, it's a little bit like if anyone plays golf here, when you hit a good golf shot, you know, you don't even need to look where the ball's going, you know you've made good connection and it's going where you wanted it to. And it's a little bit like that with just taking street photos. You have a gut feeling that you've got what you wanted, and in this case, I got what I wanted, and I actually had it in focus for once. Can anyone guess where this was taken? Yeah. So, you don't need to travel to exotic or special locations to make photos as a street photographer. The best place to take a photo is kind of where you are right now. And if you really look hard and think about what the possibilities are, there's good opportunities everywhere. And I was in the Tate. It's not somewhere I enjoy photographing because it's been done to death in terms of Instagram. Everyone's done a shot of the Tate of someone just kind of walking through the light, and I knew that if I was going to create an image there, I wanted it to be away from the kind of cliches, because everyone's seen a photo of the big shadows cast in the turbine hall and someone walking within it. And again, for me, that's not unique. It's been seen. There's nothing that special about it. And I was stood on the upper level, shooting down. Obviously, it feels a lot more intimate than a lot of photos because I'm using that kind of longer focal length to bring you closer to the subject. And there were various people and kids running past. I think I got one of the kid on the scooter with a leg up. But again, it wasn't, that could happen. Anyone could get that kind of image. And again, this is just, we'll touch on this later, but it was about being prepared, stacking your odds in your favour, creating your own luck. And I noticed this woman was walking across, and I thought she was actually about to take her jacket off. So I had my camera on like a semi kind of burst mode, continuous low or whatever, and I was kind of anticipating her like taking her jacket off like a cape. But actually what she did is the moment she entered the light was she went to remove her scarf, and it kind of made this kind of really nice circle, and you get the shadow below, and it just was lucky that kind of her heel was perfectly on the line. And again, could you recreate that? It would be hard to do unless it was staged. So again, I'm always looking for something that's a little bit unique or original, just to take it to another level. And that's you'll find with experience you get a lot harder on yourself as to what's good and what's not, and your expectations for yourself rise quite considerably. And I've been back to the Tate many times, and I've never ever got another shot that I'm happy with. So maybe that location's done for me now, but it's a photo I'm really happy with. This was a weird set of circumstances. So I've been shooting all day with my girlfriend in London, and I just knew that hadn't really got anything particularly interesting. And we were on the way home, and it was just before sunset, and the light was hitting. This is South Bank, next to the skate park, and the light was just hitting this wall. And the colours for me, with the grey and the yellow, I looked for the scene, and I saw the scene, and I thought there's definitely something interesting here. There was complexities of light, there was textures, shadows, there was opportunities for people to come up the walkway, and I think there was some kind of protest or something about the skate park being potentially closed down, so there were a lot of people around. So I set up my camera and I just waited for people to walk on by, and I didn't expect someone to walk up with a red chair. I definitely didn't expect that. But the lesson is that you should always expect the unexpected, and it just so happens that red with the yellow and the kind of grey kind of works as a palette. And the shadow here is as of the lady that's behind him at this very moment. So there's lots of different details in the image that I think make it unique or original. Are there things that I would change or improve? Absolutely, but sometimes the imperfections are kind of the things that you hold on to in the image. So, but yeah, it's combining multiple elements, and the theme in my work at the moment is increasing complexity or increasing abstraction, and we'll touch on that later. So those are two of the directions that I'm exploring at the moment. I put this image in because I kind of earned my stripes in London's Chinatown. That's where I do a lot of teaching as well. I I really wasn't confident when I started street photography. I was really nervous, and Chinatown was an area that I knew really, really well. And because there are no roads or anything, you could just do kind of laps and keep circling and practicing, and every time you would go around you would find something different. And I was struggling for direction when I first started street photography, and I just set myself a little project like, oh, why don't I just shoot the windows of Chinatown for a day? It's pretty easy to do, you know where they are, how can I take it to another level? And this is one particular restaurant on Gerrard Street. What most people would do is probably lock the focus on the subject, whereas for me I wanted to have a slight element of abstraction and mystery in the image. It's not particularly complex. You'll see, because I'm using that kind of telephoto lens, everything's quite compressed. I've done a similar shot with a kind of 28mm lens, and it doesn't really work for my eyes. And it's a portrait orientation because, well, it's a portrait kind of, and the orientation of the window as well. So lots of little details there. That restaurant manager knows me very well now, so if he sees me with the camera, he tends to duck back in the restaurant. But I think there's a couple of Chinatown window ones. But if you head to Chinatown, just try and get creative. It's a really good area to photograph, and there's lots of interesting colours, textures, characters. I think it's one of the best areas in London to do street photography, and I'm probably going to do a project that will maybe last decades, documenting the changes in the area. I really, really enjoy it. So obviously your gut feeling, your instant reaction is, well, that's not in focus, and I think I was so concerned when I first started street photography about getting everything in focus and sharp. And by studying the work of the masters, you kind of learn to put that to bed, and you realise that perfection is a bit boring in street photography, and it's not really important. It doesn't matter about how sharp your image is. It doesn't matter about the resolution, and you can have quite a free creative license if you give yourself that freedom. And I noticed that the individual was walking along One Key, which I think is the restaurant that's famed for really bad service when they're rude to customers. And he was walking along, and his face was covered by the umbrella, so there was a slight element of mystery there. But if I'd just taken a photo of what it looked like at that moment, I didn't think it would be that interesting. So I had my focus set manually, and I just bumped the focus back like 2 meters because I knew that the raindrops were falling in the foreground, and I would get them sharp, but I would still have enough detail in the subject so that you could see what was going on. Because even if there's a slight layer of abstraction or creative soft focus, it still has to be very recognisable as to what's going on. And I'm sure you can see that there's a person with an umbrella. And when this is printed, it looks really, really good because you get all the raindrops perfectly sharp in the front of the image, and then you just get this kind of nice soft background with the figure. And again, it's not, I wasn't going for a timeless aesthetic, but I guess it kind of looks that way. And again, I've gone black and white because the colours were horrendous. So there was all sorts of fluorescent conflicting lights, and it didn't look good in colour. But now, this is kind of early days, but now I would probably find a way to do that image in colour somehow, maybe take a different angle or a different time of day. And again, that's Chinatown, obviously. So this one is, this is the same location that the La La Land photo was taken at the start, with the black and white guy in the hat. And I guess I want to say that it's really, really important, if you're familiar with locations, keep revisiting them, because they will give you something new every single day, even every hour. And I have kind of routes that I'll walk in central London, and I'll revisit the same spot like 10, 15, 20 times in a day, because you don't just want to stand there like a weirdo. You've got to keep when I was on my way over here, there was a guy like stood in a hedge with a camera doing street photography. It's really weird. Keep revisiting spots, because you'll find something that you haven't seen before, and that has potential to be turned into a good photo. So This woman was waiting for a friend. I'm assuming by her expression maybe they were late. And this was very much a kind of run and gun shot because, you know, I was stood outside under lights like this, and I was completely illuminated, and it was much darker inside. And again, you'll see that there's multiple elements that I've tried to include in the frame. So this is from a billboard outside, this text. We obviously have the frame of the door. We have the handle. There is the neons which are reflecting off the window on this side. And then in the background we have just a display of what movies were on that evening. And then in this instance I decided it was important to have a sharp subject because I liked her expression. Maybe it would be better with eye contact, I don't know. Some images work with eye contact, some don't. But a common theme in my work is that it will always be candid. I do not stage photos because I don't believe that is true street photography, as controversial as it may be. Street portraiture, which is staged, or you have permission, that certainly has its place, and I really respect that. But for me, the purest form of street photography should be candid, and this is definitely a candid moment. But if you go on Instagram, you'll see stage photos and models that maybe look similar, but I have no idea who that is. And also, just going back to the first one, I was actually in Waterstones on Piccadilly a couple of weeks ago, and I saw this guy walking down the stairs, and I was in two minds as to whether to run up to him and say, "Oh, this is you in my photo," but I thought you'd think I'm a complete nutter, so I erred on the side of caution with that one. This image was taken in January last year. I think we had about 45 minutes of snow in January last year, and that was it for the year. Of course I was out shooting. I actually wasn't shooting, I was having a ramen dish, and I saw that it began to start snowing, and you kind of finish your food very quickly, because that doesn't happen in London. We're not like in New York in winter. And just behind the restaurant there was this alleyway. And I kind of like, it was just an alleyway, there was no one walking down it. I was getting a little bit frustrated because I was like, this is my one opportunity. And there was this lady walking along, saw her coming along, she had an umbrella. And one thing I really like doing is, especially at night, is I'll shoot kind of wide open on my lens, which on this particular lens is 1.2. So I'll have like an anchor point for the image, which would be like a focal point, which in this case would be like the red door. She wasn't actually heading towards the door, but I wanted that as the anchor point for the image. And then, the sharpness of everything else it doesn't really matter so much to me. But I quite like the way that the umbrella's green, the door's red, there's a road sweeper's cart there, no idea where he'd gone, it was just there. That adds to the story a little bit. And the thing that makes it interesting in my eyes is, yes, there's snow in London, which is great, and I would love it if there was more snow. Yes, there's umbrellas, which again I love shooting in the rain, it's one of my favourite things to do. But the steam or condensation from what I assume to be like a heating duct, normally that goes up straight into the air, never to be seen again, and I think it was just a gust of wind that brought it down to where the subject was, and it kind of looks like it's coming off from her umbrella. And that was just a case of like, if you know that there's a good opportunity for photo, you just got to kind of drop everything and get out there, even if it means absolutely doing more than the air like it. This was very much a run and gun again. If you go to the Strand, at the end of the Strand on the Trafalgar Square end, you'll see they park up the old Route Master buses there, because I think that's the start of the Route 9, is it maybe, where they still run them, or Route 3. And this guy, I see him all the time. Again, I haven't plucked up the courage to tell him that he's in one of my photos, because I don't want to be that guy. But he was having lunch, and I don't like photographing people when they're eating in street photography, because I wouldn't like a photo of me if I'm in the process of eating. So I kind of waited for him to finish his food. As soon as he finished, I just walked through you have a gut instinct about what your composition is going to be, and because of the shape of the window I knew that it wouldn't be a portrait shot, and normally my gut feeling is to go portrait because I shoot a lot of windows and frames and things like that, but it had to be landscape, this particular photo. I didn't really overthink it at the time, I just went up, took the shot and then walked on. It's quite simple for me in terms of composition and so on, but it looks really nice when it's printed, and the colour looks quite red on the screen there, but it's not that red when it's printed, it's a bit more muted. Again, this was one of my early images in Chinatown. This was on the same day that I took the other one, doing my little kind of mini one-day project on the windows of Chinatown. Maybe it's something I'll do for decades, and just documenting the changes. But if you're a street photographer in London, chances are you've probably taken a photo of this window where the ladies make dumplings. You know it? Yeah, everyone takes a photo of that window. And when we do workshops, we always take people to that window because they don't mind. You're quite non-threatening, they're very used to it. Now, one day I was walking through, and I've walked past this place maybe 1,000 times, and I've never ever seen the window smashed. And I thought, well, here's the unique detail that can't be recreated. I took a photo, and there were actually two ladies. Obviously, she's not a lady with three arms. So I kind of wanted the third hand in there, just to add a bit of a like what. Again, because the unique detail was the smashed glass, I had my focus set to the glass, but just enough so that you could kind of see what was going on in the background. So I was probably set at like f4 or f2.8 or something, just because if I shot wide open on this lens, you just wouldn't see anything in the background. And this window was replaced within 45 minutes. So maybe I'm the only person that ever documented this broken window in Chinatown. I've walked past every day since, and I've never seen another smash window in that location. So it has a certain uniqueness that can't be replicated, and maybe there's a certain story behind it. Next one, does everyone know the adult video restaurant or peep show cocktail bar in Soho on Old Compton Street? Yep. So it looks like a sex shop, but it's actually a restaurant or cocktail bar, and it's where all the Instagrammers go and do their nudie portraits. This one was a combination of luck and skill, maybe. More luck, definitely more luck. I was actually going for something else. I think there was a vehicle coming across, and I wanted to kind of get. The lady had a cool hat on, and I kind of wanted to get the bonnet of the car, like here, the neons coming across the roof of the car, and then kind of getting a cool hat silhouetted against the neons. But the car stopped, and what happened was a guy that walked in front of me holding a huge golf umbrella, one of those big Dunlop things. Luckily the logo wasn't on this side, because that would have killed the shot for me. It created quite a unique moment, and because I was shooting wide open again, this is actually the pole of the umbrella here, you can barely see it, it's kind of blown out because I was shooting such a wide aperture. And he looks to be looking at the subject, so I guess maybe there's a bit of a relationship between the two subjects there, and I don't think I could ever recreate that. And I quite like the colours as well. It looks really good when it's printed. You get really deep, rich blacks when you put it on like Kodak metallic paper or something like that, but we can talk about printing and papers later on. Again, completely out of focus. And one thing I would say is just be liberated by not having to worry about getting everything sharp and in focus. You can come up with interesting and more original photos if you kind of be a bit shoot fast and loose sometimes. And is this the greatest image I've ever taken? Absolutely not. But the reason I've included it today is because it reminds me that I shouldn't always be looking to achieve perfection, because if you worry about making mistakes on the technical side, it will hold you back, because you won't be compelled to shoot as many photos as you do if you're kind of shooting fast and loose. So what's actually happening here? This is outside that Picture House cinema again, so I'm in that area a lot. I do go other places, honestly. This is literally 2 foot from where the other 2 photos were taken, just turned around. This is a marble pillar, and what I've done is I've just put my camera lens right up against the marble pillar, because just a photo of that is pretty boring. And I just kind of wanted a kind of bit of abstraction, a bit of mystery. I didn't actually think I would get the guy in that kind of stance at that moment in time, and you could probably just about make out a pair of eyes there. But I thought I would include it today just to give people an idea that it doesn't have to be sharp in order to be an interesting photo. And if you look at like the work of Ernst Haas, there's a lot of abstraction, there's a lot of blur, there's a lot of kind of creative focus, and for me they're some of the best images because they're completely unique, completely original, and the details within the image still have to be identifiable. So if you couldn't tell that was a person with an umbrella, it would just be a kind of washed out mess probably, and I wouldn't have used it. But shoot fast and loose, make mistakes, and sometimes those can be your favourite photos. I like shooting buses, especially when it rains. And again, I didn't necessarily want to shoot what it looks like, or the person looks like. I wanted to shoot what it felt like at that moment. It was absolutely clattering down with rain. And the reason I took the shot was because the jacket colour with the seats kind of matched up. There were some kind of traffic lights and signs in the background that again had red, and where you have an opportunity to bring an element of abstraction or layers or complexity in the image, then I would always encourage you to explore that. So when I'm working a scene, I'll generally take photos at different focal points to see what I like best if I've got the time. So maybe I would have done a shot locked in the far distance and have everything in the foreground completely blown out. Maybe I would have done a shot on the subject, completely tack sharp, and then everything else blown out. And then maybe I would do the photo which I arrived at, which is the only photo I took actually. I didn't take more than one photo, of the manually focus on the raindrops. I probably had 3 seconds to get the shot, and then the moment was gone. And moments are fleeting on the street, and if you have a slight feeling, right, I should take the photo, just take the photo, because what's the worst that can happen? The moment's gone and you'll never ever be able to get that photo back. So, once with practice, you should see, compose and take the shot in under a second with practice. So see, compose, take the shot, and you should have a gut feeling within you, whether it's portrait, landscape, what your composition's going to be. If you're thinking about your kind of rule of thirds, it's a subject on a point of interest. You'll develop a very strong gut feeling over time as to what your composition will be and how you can frame those things. And you'll notice that my appreciating the colour is obviously improved since my black and white days. This is another image, very abstract. It's not for everyone in terms of street photography. I don't do kind of humour and juxtaposition. I just don't have the eye for it. It's not the way I see the world. I genuinely see the world in like a vivid kind of abstract sense. It sounds like I'm on drugs, but I'm not. Definitely not. So anyway, this image, how do you think this was taken? Where or what? How do you think it was taken?
Shooting from inside out, street glass.
Yeah. I was sat in the back of a bus. So basically I'd spent 9 hours shooting straight, and I'd had a terrible day in the office. And I'd had no photos I was happy with. I knew, I don't check my LCD when I'm out, but I knew I'd had no good photos. And I was sat in the back of the bus, and it was really, really raining hard, and I was heading towards the bus station where I live. And I noticed how the car headlights were hitting the back of the glass on the bus, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. Maybe there's something here. So I did a couple of test shots, and I thought, okay. I was sat kind of here, and the back of the bus was there, which with an 85mm lens is kind of like really close. And to get your focus absolutely spot on is tough. But I'd pre-focused. I knew that when the bus stops, chances are someone's going to come out the back door and then walk around the back, and maybe I could get the hint of a figure, or something like that. And what actually happened here is the bus terminated at the bus station, and the bus driver still had his feet on the brake when everyone was walking out the back. And this lady had a Sainsbury's bag. Other supermarkets are available, I should perhaps say that. And the shopping bag was kind of illuminated by the brake lights. So you have that kind of detail. You've obviously got the kind of, I don't even know what's going on there. I think this is another bus behind the headlights there, which is kind of creating this kind of crazy abstract effect. And I took another shot immediately after, which I'll be sharing with you, just to show you how same location, 10 seconds apart, can give you a completely different result. And that's one of my favourite images, because when most people think of street photography, they don't think of that kind of thing. But for me, that's very much in my style and my direction. I'm not a fan of just people walking off down the street wearing like funny clothes. It's not particularly interesting to me, but I admire people that can do it well. This image was taken outside Covent Garden Tube Station. I've just dropped off a print for a guy that I've done a workshop with, and I wasn't really looking for photos. I had my camera out and I thought, oh, there's a stack of newspapers there, maybe something. I'm naturally drawn to the colour red, and I noticed that there was red in the background, and I knew that there was the this way sign, so I had the kind of elements of a scene roughly there. And then I noticed the man from Del Monte in the background walking along in his fedora hat, and you never see people in like white linen suits in London, so I thought, oh, I've got to take a shot here. And just at the moment I started taking the photo, I met this guy pushing a lady in a wheelchair who walked in front of him. My gut feeling at the time was, oh no, I've missed it. I didn't check the photo until I got home, but I thought I'd probably just had his arms or her head in the image and I'd lost everything else. I took a series of photos, and like every single one was a complete horror show apart from this one. Again, I think if it was maybe if it was shot at f8 or f11, I feel that maybe these elements would have been too distracting for me. There's too much going on. They don't need to be sharp in order to tell the story of the image. So I'd already preset my focus on the newspapers for a bit of texture, just to bring something else to the photo. And I knew that as the guy walked along, and this was the kind of unexpected surprise. Does it make it an award-winning photo? I don't know, but I like it, and it's got a certain uniqueness to it that I really like, and I like the sign as well this way. So this is the same window as the other brake light ones. This is five or 6 seconds afterwards. So you see how the colours are completely different, and this is just before, because you'll see that this detail is exactly the same. This is just after the lady had walked past. This is the bus that was illuminating the umbrella from above before, and this person, I don't know why they were just standing there, but they were kind of far away, and you just got the kind of suggestion of a person. And I really like abstraction. Because I feel that when you do stuff that's quite abstract, you have more of a uniqueness to your images sometimes. And I really like painting as well, and this feels to me more like, this puts me in touch with my painting side, because I don't do so much of it now, so I paint with the camera. But there's lots of complexity in terms of light and details, and if the focus was set in the distance, you wouldn't have maybe got this kind of bizarre effect that we've got there. So that's very much kind of a Saul Leiter, Ernst, Haas inspired image. Windows of Chinatown project. This was taken with I was just testing a lens out a few weeks ago. I thought, I've been shooting at 85mm full frame equivalent, why not step it up and go to 135? So this was just a kind of bit of fun, bit of a test. And 135 for street photography is, I can see some of you looking at me like I'm crazy, but I thought I'd just give it a go and see how that kind of works on the street. And I really like the compression that 135 gives you. And again, you'll notice that if I'm photographing windows, I'm generally locking my focus on the detail on the glass if there's condensation or water, and I'm not too concerned with what's going on in the background. I'm obviously conscious that you need something to be happening, like maybe it's eye contact or a gesture or something, but for me that's not the be-all and end-all. I just waited for the moment that she turned. I tried to get a balanced composition in terms of my framing, so I guess that's kind of like a rule of thirds. It's not kind of. And then I tried to kind of balance out the composition. So here I was already set up. I had the time because she wasn't going anywhere. She was cooking. She knows me very well. There were lots of elements in the background that were very distracting. So I knew I wanted a wide aperture. So this was shot on like 1.4 on 135mm equivalent lens. Very cheap lens, manual focus, and I would always say, we'll touch on this later, but don't get too hung up on the gear that you're using, because street photography isn't necessarily a really technical form of photography. It doesn't matter about your sharpness or your resolution. What matters is the feeling in your images and how you can connect with what's going on and connect the viewer to the details of it. Approaching the end, again, another abstract one. So this is Starbucks in Soho. This is my version of Starbucks in Soho. Now, obviously you're thinking that's not Starbucks. There was some kind of advert up for I think it was Easter, and it created this kind of really weird texture on the glass at night. So I saw it during the day. I went back a few hours later with a friend actually, and we took some photos, and this is actually two people having a conversation, so they were sat inside the window. So this is the shoulder of one person here, and this is another person with very scruffy hair, it was the colours that attracted me. Again, I like that kind of, you don't quite know what's going on, because I like putting stuff out there on social media that challenges people to look at it and think about, well, what's actually going on here. Because if you just put it on the plate for the viewer, they'll just kind of skim past it, and you can tell who's really looking if you put stuff out that challenges them a little bit. But I really like the abstraction there. This is taken in Leicester Square, familiar stomping grounds. It's a single exposure, it's not a double exposure, and it's just combining multiple elements in the frame to show a relationship between each other. And I just want to say, when you're walking around, the things that maybe you can be looking for, when I'm walking around certainly, is firstly light, colour, texture, reflections, gestures, interactions, emotions, all of those kind of things. And if you can combine multiple elements in one photo, then you've definitely got the makings of a good photo. So this is from an advert actually that was on here that was reflecting on the glass, and then we've got some people. I do have another photo which has got a lady's face that was kind of like this far from the lens, which is quite cool as well. But don't be afraid to add complexity into your images, because that could make them more unique. But you've got to kind of balance that complexity with the viewer being able to understand what's actually going on. And then the final image I'm going to talk about today, I guess the lesson from this is always carry a camera. I was doing some errands locally to where I live, and I had a little point and shoot with me. I didn't have my normal camera. Just had a little point and shoot, because you never ever know what's going to present itself to you. And the camera on my particular phone, my rubbish phone, is not very good. So I had a little point and shoot, and I was walking along, and again I spotted the scene. I saw the potential of the scene, and what was happening here was this was in a market, and there was people kind of going in and out to take out bins from the food market. And I preset my focus manually, so all I needed to worry about at the moment of capture was just lifting up the camera. I already had the composition in my mind, and just capturing the moment that I thought was right. Now, what's happening here is this guy walked straight past me and saw me standing in the middle of nowhere with a camera, so he knew what was going to happen as soon as he walked back through, because there was nowhere for me to hide. I mean, I I was in plain sight. So what he did was, I don't know whether he was annoyed with me, he didn't actually say anything afterwards, but he kind of raised his arm up and just went like that and smashed through. But I didn't want that moment, I kind of wanted the moment before. So what he's doing is like a kind of showing off his muscles type pose here. So we've got the subject, we've then got the shadow from the subject, and then the third element is the reflection, which was the welcome surprise when I looked on the computer. I didn't even notice that at the time actually. I knew that it was reflecting that, but I didn't even think that I would get that third element in there. And if you're familiar with the rule of odds in photography, it's kind of like an odd number of things is more visually appealing than an even number of ones, so 1, 3, 5, etc. So I guess there's a slight nod to the rule of odds in that image, whether it's that obvious or not. And the colours with the red and the green up here, which kind of ties with the floor, again, I could kind of sniff opportunity for a photo. So I got ready, composed, and you don't need a good camera in order to make a nice image. This was taken with the cheapest and oldest camera that I own, but it's one of my favourites. Again, I think it looks really, really nice in print, much better than it does on a PC screen. So, any questions about the images?
Good question.
Yes.
You mentioned that you now work as a professional photographer, right? Means that you make a living, yeah?
Yes, I do, yeah.
With photography and street photography, that is. And a few years ago, if someone would have said, okay, can I make a living as a street photographer 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have said like, you better look for a different job, basically, because who's going to buy your pictures? I mean, maybe if you become very successful, maybe you can make a living from selling books and maybe your images through exhibitions, but in general it's difficult basically. It's pretty much something that you used to do for yourself, but that now has completely changed, right? And I guess through social media, and because your visual style is very recognizable, I'd say that you have very strong signature style up to the point when you shoot or produce new work, and someone who's familiar with the old work you produce, they might be able to guess, oh, is that maybe one of Josh's new photographs? It kind of looks like it, no? Can you tell us a little bit about what sort of jobs you are being commissioned for, and also are you able, which is like the holy grail of commercial photography, are you able to translate your visual style, your signature style, into those commissions? Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean the answer is yes and no. You kind of need to forget about the profession of being a street photographer, because walking the street and making nice photos isn't going to pay the bills. Don't get me wrong, print sales and workshops can be very lucrative, but it's really, really hard work, and it took me a while to even sell my first print. Now, it's a very big part of my income because I'm backed by some investors and collectors that believe that the value of my work is going to go up, but nothing really happened for a year. Nothing really. I had a couple of people that wanted to buy photos, but in terms of like a commercial appeal to street photography, just think about like where you could leverage it in other fields, and I think that street photography has a very natural crossover to documentary style photography, also editorial photography, photojournalism. There's a natural kind of dovetail there, I guess, that they fit together. But in terms of the stuff that I do, a lot of companies will approach me and say, right, we like your style, we're redesigning a website, or we are doing a magazine and we would like a front cover in your style in street photography that's candid but abstract so that we don't need model releases. Can you do something like that for us? So for instance, I've just done I'm doing a website for a commercial business at the moment, and they want a series of like abstract images as their kind of big banners. And it's a big company, and they commission me, so you're basically getting paid to go out on the street and find weird stuff, which is kind of cool, which I enjoy. So that's the kind of commercial stuff that I do. I also do more kind of traditional like lifestyle photography. So for instance, I do there's like a British luxury goods company that I do a lot of content for. So they make like men's bags and stuff, and I'll do like street shooting what's it called, street fashion or something like that. You know, guys walking on the street with bags and stuff, but they kind of want it in my style. You know, they hire me off because they like my approach to photography. So I do that kind of stuff, and then I also have done some stuff in the drinks industry recently, which I never thought I would say, which I'm not complaining, it's great fun. And I've been teaching the brand ambassadors at Hendrick's Gin how to create their own content. So I'm kind of passing on my knowledge and showing them that you guys should be the influencers for your company. You shouldn't hire photographers to produce images for you. You guys know your brand and organisation better than anyone. I'll teach you how to go out and take photos as part of your day-to-day role, and then you communicate that with your audience. So that's the kind of more like the content strategy piece. But yeah, it's definitely crossover, but you just need to think strategically about where your skills can be leveraged. You're not going to be paid to walk the streets unless someone like the New York Times comes up to you, like you're Aaron Daniel or someone that says, right, we want you to do a project on a week in this city, or we want you to go and shoot an event for Vogue or something. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen to me because it's not really my style. But there's certainly commercial applications, and I think the good thing about street photography is it teaches you to think on your feet very quickly, and you know, all you need really is a camera and a bit of light and you're good to go. You know, I don't need a studio in order to work. I can work with the available light on the street any time of day, come rain or shine. You know, I'm used to shooting conditions that are far from perfect, and that gives you quite good advantage over someone that's maybe only shot in the studio, because if you put them on the street in bad conditions, you know, maybe they would struggle. But street photography teaches you very quickly how to learn to work with your camera, and there's definitely applications for commercial work. So you can make a living, but not just by walking the streets getting paid, because that's kind of like the dream, right? But it takes like decades to get there, and publishing deals. But I would say if you want to get there, then it's really, really important to work on projects, and then maybe get publishing deals off the back of those projects, or maybe do like exhibitions off the back of your projects. So that's personally what I'm working towards at the moment. I'm doing projects as well as just shooting to make nice images. But the project stuff is, you know, I can maybe go to a publisher in a year and say, right, I've dedicated thousands of hours to doing this. This is my body of work of, say, 100 images. You know, let's do the deal and get a book done. And then maybe that's going to open the door to something else. But it takes time. But don't quit your day job and think you can make a living as a street photographer. But there are avenues that you can definitely explore.
Did you consider annual reports, just out of interest?
Did I consider
shooting annual reports?
No, I think I think for that kind of work is probably too clinical and clean, the aesthetic maybe.
No. They're looking for.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe I should pitch some of my former clients in Big Four, some of the banks and stuff. So I think anyone that takes an interest in your photography, you know, you should try and seize opportunities for business. And the good thing about street photography is if you work hard and develop a style, you kind of like have a monopoly over your own skills and experience. So you can kind of start really pumping up your prices and charging rates, because you know, only you can create those kind of images. You know, I'm not just taking a photo of what something looks like. You know, I'm trying to be a bit different, and that's when you can start commanding higher prices. So yeah, we'll just move on to the tips and tricks part. So I thought this was important today because I don't just want to talk about my photos, I actually want it to be educational, and I think teaching is something I really, really love doing, and I thought this would be add value to everyone in the room. It would also add value to me just to remind myself of these things, because I do get bad habits occasionally. So, when I'm teaching workshops, the absolute first thing that I ever touch on is talking about dealing with what I call the fear. Yeah? Now, don't get me wrong, I still get scared. Yeah? There are moments where I think, no, you know, he's going to kill me. There are moments when I get scared, it's only natural. But for a lot of people, when you're first starting out, if you are scared and you have negative thoughts like, you know, you kind of feel that you want to take the photo, but something holds you back. You know, we've all felt that, unless you're like Bruce Gilden or someone who's never given it. Can we swear? I don't know. But you know, negative thoughts are perfectly natural, and I would say that a lot of people, when they have negative thoughts, they kind of deal with that by standing too far back from the action, so you don't really have that kind of intimacy in your photo, so it's kind of a bit like voyeuristic almost, like from like 50 metres away, like someone walking down the street. It's just a bit weird, kind of street photography in my eyes. And also, if you are nervous and you're scared, it will also mean that you're projecting the wrong body language. And I see this all the time. So I'll see people like walking around, so they're just looking like this. Yeah, it's weird. And they're so scared about making a mistake that they're not realising how they're projecting themselves to everyone around them. And they get so kind of overwhelmed by the fear that they end up upsetting the scene, not only for themselves but for any other photographers that are in the local vicinity. So like a really silly exercise that I do when I start my street photography workshops is I say to them, right, let's assume we're a group of tourists. Yeah, let's just say we're from America today. Let's pretend we're taking a movie. Yeah, so what we do is we flip out our LCD, so we put like live view on our camera, and then we just pretend to be like walking down the street like this, taking a movie, looking in the distance, not making eye contact with anyone, and you'll be surprised, you can just walk up like this, like get this close to people, and people do not care, because they just assume you're a tourist, and your intentions are good, and you're not out to hurt anyone, you're not out to make anyone look bad. And I can't stress the importance enough of projecting the right body language and being relaxed, and you'll find that if you're open and honest about what you're doing, and if your intentions are good, you will not get confrontations. Obviously this will probably go wrong one day in a workshop, and I'll say, look how easy it is, and I'll get punched, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. Do you engage with your subjects afterwards? Never. Not afterwards, sort of take a photo.
Never. I'm too busy taking the next photo. Right. I don't have time for chit chat. So it's always candid. And also when you finish taking your photo, just on that point as well, I see so many people like looking at the back of their LCD, and I'm just like, there's something better walking past you right now. Don't jump on the back of your screen. Resist the temptation to look at your photos. Leave them as a little surprise for yourself when you get home. So that's why I love shooting film, because you can't check what you've got. The surprise is when you go to the lab and pick up your prints, you're like, that's probably a crap photo. So, I would say, firstly, deal with the fear and negative thoughts. It's the most important thing, because if you're scared, it will show in your photos. And if I look at people message me daily and say, can you critique my photos? And I just say, I can see that you're scared, because you're standing too far back, you're trying to be sneaky with what you're doing. I can tell that maybe you're trying to conceal your camera and shooting from the hip and stuff. There's no consideration for composition. You have to deal with the fear. It's the most important thing. And if you're comfortable and projecting the right body language and relaxed and open, there's a little tip that I say to people. This is really silly again. I say, if someone's giving out leaflets locally, grab a leaflet, just keep it in your left hand if you're right-handed. Have your camera in your right hand. Just be walking around and just keep that in your left hand like that. If it's white, that will grab their attention, not the camera. So just be walking around, just with a leaflet in your hand, and just lift up your camera, bang. Yeah, simple as that. And you'll find that people will be looking at that, not your camera in your hand. So just anything you can do is a little kind of distraction tactic. And just move slow, be nice and relaxed, because if you're rushing, it makes you look scared, and it looks like you're trying to hide something. So number one is the most important thing in street photography. And also respect people's personal space as well. Where is that invisible line? You have to use your emotional intelligence to. Secondly, this is really, really important for anyone that's kind of starting out in street photography. Don't get bogged down in the technical side. Learning the manual controls on the camera is really good and important. But if you're just starting out, you don't want to be thinking, right, what shutter speed do I need, what ISO do I need, what aperture do I need in order to achieve X exposure. There is absolutely no shame in using any automatic modes on your camera if you're just starting out, because the fun part is taking the photo and taking in the world. You don't want to be distracted by this. This isn't really important. The important thing is actually seeing with the world and looking at opportunities for photos and seeing stories. So anything you can do to remove the technical distraction, just do it. I shoot in aperture priority quite often at night. If it's bright sunlight that's consistent throughout the day, of course I'll set my exposure manually, because I don't need to worry about changing it for like 2-3 hours. But I would say to people, just set your camera to an auto mode that you're comfortable with, forget about it. Just shoot fast and loose and don't worry about the technical side. Thirdly, always be prepared. So if you're walking around with your lens cap on your camera, are you prepared? Probably not. So if sometimes you see like the photo kind of unfolding in front of you, and if you've got your camera kind of like in your rucksack or with your lens cap on, you're not prepared in order to get the photo. So even if I'm not taking photos, I'll check my exposure, so that I know that if something happens, bang, I can just take the shot. I don't need to worry about anything else. Lens cap off always. I've got a UV filter on there just so I don't scratch the front element, because sometimes I'm a little bit reckless. But always be prepared. Always assume that the next opportunity for a photo is just around the corner. So always be thinking about that. And if you're having a bad day and things aren't going your way, there could be something magic just happening around the corner. So always persevere and be prepared to capture that moment. Fourth, one of the areas a lot of street photos fall down, in my opinion. There's nothing really interesting happening in the photo. It's just photos of people on the street doing nothing in particular. Really think about what's going on. Like, is there a relationship between the subject? Is it beautiful to look at? Do the colours work? All of that kind of stuff. So I would always recommend really considering what's going on. And if there's a gesture or something, again, those are things that you should really be thinking about. And you've got to go beyond the ordinary, and show how you personally connect with the world through your photos. So always be thinking about what's actually happening here and how's that going to be perceived by a third party. 5, we touched on this earlier. Forget about perfection, shoot fast and loose. So what if you make a blurry photo? It could be your best photo you've ever made. It doesn't matter. People that message me about what's the sharpest lens or what's the best camera to achieve sharp photos, it doesn't matter. It's much more important to have a fast shutter speed so that you can at least freeze motion if that's what you're trying to do. So, but you can ask me about settings later. Show something new. So like with the red chair and the lady in the shadow and stuff like that, you've got to try and take the viewer on a journey somewhere they haven't necessarily been before, metaphorically speaking, of course. So try and combine elements that maybe haven't happened or won't happen ever again. And that photo will stand out as much more original, and people will remember your work if you can show them something new. In street photography there's a lot of cliches, of course. People walking around with umbrellas, people in nice hats, all of that kind of stuff, gentlemen dressed in kind of suits and things like that. To go beyond that, you've got to show them something that they haven't seen before. And maybe if you had like 5 people doing exactly the same thing, then that could be cool. But just a photo of like someone walking down the street with an umbrella, I get sent images like that daily. And there's just nothing unique or interesting about it. So you've got to show the viewer something over and above the ordinary. 7, sometimes what you don't show is just as important as what you do show. All good photographers take a lot of bad photos in street photography. That's a fact. All good photographers take bad photos. I take thousands of bad photos, but no one sees them, apart from the odd howler that I put on Instagram, just to test if who's looking. But you've got to be really critical of your own work, and don't just select an image because you think, it's okay, it's like a 6 out of 10. Because that's your reputation on the line if you put rubbish out there in the public domain. Share your best, leave the rest, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Post-processing, another area I see people really falling down is that they do too much to the images. If your image is good, if you go to the blog on my website, I share quite often what my raw file looks like and then what my edited file looks like. if your image is good, you should just literally need to breathe on it and then it's done. I just do some colour manipulation. I actually drag down the clarity to make it a little bit less sharp, because this thing's insane, to make it a little bit more soft, because I don't really like the really clinical look of modern digital cameras. But yeah, don't go to town with the post-processing. Just keep it nice and simple, and try and express your personality through the content in the images, not by doing some like crazy preset or weird colour manipulation. Don't try and reinvent the wheel, just keep it nice and simple initially, and the best way to find your style through post-processing is just to experiment. The problem with buying presets is that you're buying someone else's look that they've created, and it's never yours really. By all means use them as a base to maybe find something, but I think it's best if you develop something from scratch, and just keep it nice and simple. Number 9, really important, feedback. Because sometimes you don't necessarily know where you're going wrong. So I would recommend people, like if you're doing street photography, enter some competitions whereby you actually get feedback from a respectable judge who's like well known within the street photography community. Don't gauge the quality of your work by what your Instagram followers are telling you, because these people are already emotionally invested in your work, and they won't necessarily give you the hard truths that maybe an independent person would. So I value feedback from like for example, lens culture, if everyone's heard of lens culture. Like the only reason I entered that last year was just so I could get the feedback. I wasn't really even concerned about any award. I just wanted the, whatever it was, $30 to get feedback from someone that was a respectable person in the industry. And they gave me some really good advice and areas to improve and work on, and I've taken that on board, and maybe this year I'm a better photographer as a result of it. So get feedback from people that you respect, admire. If you have a favourite photographer, send them an email and say, right, here's 3 of my best images, what would you do to change or improve them? What's the worst that can happen? They can not reply. Yeah, people message me all the time with images, and I say, right, this is good, maybe the composition could be improved this way, colours don't look right, maybe the white balance is off, that kind of stuff. Contact people that you admire and people that make work that you aspire to make, and ask them for feedback. And you can sometimes, feedback from these individuals is what's going to give you the feedback that you need to get in order to get to the next level. Number 10, create your own luck. If you go out shooting for 20 minutes a week, what are the chances of you finding something unique or interesting? Very small, probably. Street photography takes a huge amount of commitment, as well as maybe working 40 hours a week on commercial work, marketing, business development, strategy stuff, all of that kind of stuff. I'll probably do another 40 hours out on the streets shooting. It's really, really important to spend time on the streets, and the more time you're out, the more things you're going to bump into that are interesting. So you have to make that commitment to yourself, and some days you'll get absolutely nothing, some weeks you'll get nothing, and you may have thousands of photos and nothing to show for it, but it's worth it if you get that one photo that's special and unique, because no one can take that away from you, providing you have good backup solutions. And then finally, this is the thing I go on about all the time to people: upgrade your skills before your gear. We are groomed to feel that better cameras and equipment are the path to making better photos, and they're not. The truth is, this camera here, I traded in a Canon lens and £17 for this. This is a Fujifilm X Pro 1, which is a really old camera, very slow. This is my favourite camera. It's not a good camera, it's 16 megapixels. It's really slow, it freezes all the time. But I love the images that it produces. Are they particularly high resolution? No. But it inspires me to go shooting with that camera. And a lot of people think, oh, if I get a full frame, whatever, D850 or whatever the new one is, I'm going to take better street photos. You're not, because it's not going to change how you see the world and how you connect with it. So always upgrade your skills, take workshops with photographers that you admire, and that's a much better investment than if you go out and buy the latest camera. Travel to another city. Spend a week photographing rather than spending £1,000 on a new camera. The gear can come later, but most people don't use the gear to the full potential. So I'd always say upgrade skills before gear, and that's going to have a far bigger impact on your photos than So thank you very much for your time. Any questions? Yes?
Have you ever photographed abroad? And if so, did you approach it any differently to as you would London?
No. So I started street photography in August 2016, August last year. So I'm still a beginner. So I would like to go to New York and Tokyo, but I've never done street photography abroad, no. I've got some trips planned, but no, I've never taken my skills elsewhere, unfortunately. I will do at some point though.
I don't really use social media. I was just wondering how important you think Instagram is in sort of creating awareness. Is that the be or end all?
No, absolutely not. Find a platform that you have an affinity with and use that. So like, I use probably Twitter more than I use Instagram. I know I have quite a big following on Instagram, but does that yield me huge results? Does Twitter yield me huge results? Probably not. I probably get the most return through investing months of time in SEO for my own website, because I'm directing direct traffic to my own website where I'm showcasing my products, my services, my prints, and that actually pays more than just someone following me on Instagram saying, oh, you've got nice photos. So social media, I think it's important to spread awareness of your work and what you're doing, but it's not the be all and end all. And it's easy to get into this kind of spiral of like, oh, I've only got X number of followers, X number of likes, why didn't people like this photo? I think it's easier to stay true to your artist's vision if you kind of almost ignore what goes on social media. Have a presence by all means, but it's not the most important thing. I think it's important to showcase your skills, your portfolio work on your own website, and use your social media platform to direct traffic to where you can best represent who you are as a photographer or artist. So yeah, but I would encourage put yourself on there and be active, because it's a good way to not only spread awareness but also form new partnerships and relationships. So like Craig, who I do workshops with, I met him through Instagram last year, and now we've taught like 161 people at last count on street photography workshops in London. So and that's just in the last year. So I had no idea who he was before Instagram. So it's definitely worthwhile, but it's not the be all and end all, to answer your question.
So maybe a question about this kind of tip and trick. There are platforms like, because you mentioned platforms like 500 pics or something like that. Provided you already have some bulk of work that you think you're pleased with, I mean, you're convinced that you could go and show to the world and probably find someone who could be interested in, say, buying it. Would 500 pics be the keyword to look for, or rather some other direction?
I like 500 px, but I work with them, so I do online classes. I'm doing online classes at the moment for 500 px. I'm like an instructor for them. I think it's a great platform, but there is so much content on there. Being found, unless you put lots of content on there also, is very, very difficult. The best thing to do is actually just straight up old school business development. So if you have done, say for example, say I've done a bag shoot for a friend on the streets of London. Yeah, so I've got a mini portfolio of, say, lifestyle shots. Then there's nothing to stop me doing a PDF with a case study, recommendation from the client, where they were used, what the investment was to deliver that work, and then contacting 15 other bag companies in London to say, right, I can do this for you. Here's the quality in my work. Here's the quality in my work. So you're kind of backing up your statements. Here's a recommendation to build trust. Here's the number of the person that I did the work for. That is going to pay you much more than if one person bought one of your images off 500 px, because you're going to get a day or more of work that could be a long-term relationship. So I would actually, this goes back to my days in the city. Old school business development is actually, it's up to be. Yeah, and you'll find that if you are proactive on that side, marketing and business development, you have such a competitive edge, because a lot of photographers are very, very lazy with doing that kind of stuff. So, I'm surprised when I speak to business owners and they say, we've never even been contacted by a photographer. I'm like, what? They just say, oh, we just find someone through someone else. Your referral network's great, but you can't just expect the phone to ring. You've got to go out there and form new relationships. So do a photo shoot for a friend that runs a company of some kind, and then approach similar companies and say, right, this is my work, and you'll be surprised. What's the worst that can happen?
The simpler.
Yeah, and put the references on your website, maybe put the case studies available to download. It's just about stacking the odds in your favour, and it's not rocket science, but business development is something that's often overlooked and it's really, really important. You've got to put yourself out there.
In terms of your relationship with investors and prints, can you explain how that relationship came about? Did you approach them? Did they approach you?
No, I haven't contacted any galleries or investors. It's just people seeing my work online and saying, we like what you're doing, maybe it could appreciate in value in the future. What are you doing with regards to limited editions? What are you doing with regards to your quality assurance on the process? Because you can't just use a standard like Fuji archive paper and sell it for £1,000 or whatever. They just kind of want to know what your kind of artist vision is, where you're going, what maybe projects you're going to be working on in the future, because all of these things build a picture of who you are as a photographer and maybe where you're going. Because if you kind of come up with like, I don't know, I just walk the streets and take photos, they're kind of like, well, how committed are you to it? So they need to know that you have some kind of direction behind your work. So at the moment I'm working on a project called Beneath the Surface, which is on the London Underground, which is convenient for winter. And I'm looking at diversity and disparity in income, race and religion through London's underground network. It's all in black and white, which is unusual for me. I think that works best. So that's a project that I'm working on. What am I doing at the moment? I'm speaking to publishers to build some hype, because I don't want to have done the project in like a year's time and then they say, because then I can have another 3 or 4 months to find a publisher. I want to publish it now, so that that's all sorted, and then back myself to deliver the work within the timescale that we agree. So yeah, it's just about like, if people like your work, then they will pay you for it. It's as simple as that. And also with prints, I think the mistake a lot of people make is they sell their work too cheaply. So like for example, like this image here, this is actually one of my best selling prints. And it's probably one of the most blurry photos that I sell. But there's maybe 5,000 hours of walking the streets and getting absolutely nothing for months that went into getting that photo. So would I sell that print for, if I'm doing a limited edition of 7, am I going to sell that for £100? Absolutely not, because it doesn't represent the time and effort that I put into generating that image. I spent so many hours failing on the streets and being scared, and making mistakes, and that's a kind of culmination of all that. So I price the work accordingly to what I think my time is worth. So don't undersell your work, because if you sell a print for 40 quid, the truth is people won't take you seriously if you sell it for 40 quid. It's better to price it a little bit more highly, and then give people more value for upgrading the paper, the print process, making it a limited edition. There's things that you can do so that they feel like they're getting more. And also, like if someone's buying a print off you, give them discounts on buying other prints. I never ever sell one print. I always sell at least 3, because I incentivize them to buy other prints through me. And then I build a mailing list, and then I'll contact them each time I issue a new limited edition. And then what happens? They buy the next limited edition. So they build up a body of work. So every time you issue a new limited edition, you've got, say, 15 people that you know are bankers to buy those in a particular size, and that list will grow and grow and grow. So it's just about being organised with your marketing and building up your circle of influence within your network.
Well, you talked about overcoming fear earlier, and that's probably one big thing. I almost got assaulted two guys for taking a photo of my second street photo, and that's obviously carried with me, not getting up close to people, being I'm always respectful of people's personal space anyway, but it does really hinder me. Is there anything which you obviously spoke about in a bit of a similar situation, is there anything at any given point where your attitude changed to that fear and you overcame it and you were confident in getting up close, relatively close to people.
I learned
Like
most.
a creep.
I actually learned most by watching other street photographers in
Right.
Chinatown, and because it's a tourist area, you get a lot of like tourists doing street photography there, and it's
Yeah.
obviously their first attempt at it.
Yeah.
And I just watch them, and like you see what happens around them and how it makes people uncomfortable and nervous, and like people run indoors and stuff. And I just learned like that the way that they were doing it at those moments weren't the way to do it. And one of the biggest things that leads to confrontations is people have too much intensity in their face.
Yeah.
And if you just relax the muscles, smile, a smile costs nothing, and you can very quickly disarm, and don't make eye contact.
Yeah.
So like, people are like, oh, they knew that you were taking a photo of them. I'm like, I don't know, because I never looked at them. I never know if someone's looked at me if I've taken a photo, because I've never looked at them. I never ever look at the subject.
Yeah.
I use my peripheral vision, because if I'm doing this, and I'm looking directly at you with a camera with a stern face, what am I telling you I'm doing? I'm
Yeah.
taking a photo of you.
Yeah.
Because if I'm doing that, I know exactly where you are and where you're composed from my lens.
Yeah.
I'm planting the element of doubt, because I'm looking at something in the distance. I'm not interested in taking a photo of you.
Yeah.
I am, but
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
So it's about using your influencing skills,
Yeah.
and just being slow and like holding your nerve. So like there's a quite a funny video on YouTube by a guy called Zach Arias. I think he's a Fujifilm photographer, and I think he's in India or somewhere. And there's a guy like working on like a motorbike, and he's like this close, and he's like, so I'm just like pretending to photograph the sky, lifting down the camera, pointing back up at the sky, and he's just standing there for like an uncomfortable amount of time that the guy thinks like, this guy's definitely not taking photos of me, he's just taking photos of the sky. So just think about how you're like coming across to me, because if I'm just suddenly doing this and like making eye contact with you afterwards, then and if I've been confronted once, twice actually. Once on Piccadilly by a guy I wasn't taking a photo of. I was actually taking a photo of the street, which I thought was kind of cool that day. And then another one was by another confrontation, which was an angry confrontation, which I diffused quickly, I must add. Didn't get to fisticuffs. Was a homeless guy saw me taking photos of someone through a window, and he threatened me that if I took photos of him, then he would insert whatever expletives, beat me up. And again, I was like, I'm not going to take photos of you. But to most people on the street, if you explain you're taking photos of other people, they think you're a complete lunatic. What are you doing? Like on workshops, if there's like 5 of us taking photos from like the same window, we see other people start photographing the same window, because I'm like, who's in there? Is that a celebrity? Like, no, it's just like a lady making dumplings. We've had that before, like 6 other people come around and they're photographing the same thing. Like, who's that? Who's that? Is that?
There's a bunch of people.
It's like, is that Tom Cruise? No, it's just a lady making dumplings. So it happens all the time, which is quite funny. But I'm going to be putting out some video content on YouTube in the next couple of months, and hopefully we'll capture some of those funny moments. But to answer your question, just kind of lose the intensity, don't make eye contact with people, and smile. So, and just walk slowly. I kind of walk like this kind of pace. Never stand still. Even if I'm scanning a scene, I'm walking around just to kind of check where's the best angle. Is it left? Is it straight on? Is it right? Is it behind? Just keep moving. And if the moment's not right, just do a lap around the block and come back. It doesn't matter. There'll be a completely different set of circumstances that could be better. But it's all about body language. It's all about body language. And just kind of judging where that line is between like, this is too close, isn't it, with the camera? If I'm like looking over there and snap and then just keep walking and looking in the distance, I'm not hurt anyone. And so long as your intentions are good and honest and you're not out to make people look bad, if anything, you're out to kind of glorify the subject, then you shouldn't have anything to fear. And if someone does come up to you and say, well, how are you doing? Then just pay them a compliment as to what it was that interested you about the scene. But the good thing is if people ever ask me like to view the photo of themselves on the back of my screen, it's just going to be like an abstract mess that they'll be like, what the hell is that? they're not going to see themselves on the back of the screen quite often. But yeah, maybe I should have gone up to this guy and said, because maybe he would have liked the photo. But any other questions?
You said that you spend 40 hours a week working, 40 hours doing street photography.
Yeah.
What about the editing and the choosing of the photographs? I mean, how much time do you think?
I just kind of do it when I've got my downtime, really. Editing, editing. Oh yeah, I like editing kind of late at night. With no distractions. I never throw away any of my raw files. I just keep them on a hard drive. So I've got like 8 terabytes of like street photos from like last year, which is insane. Yeah, I just go through, and if an image takes more than 2 minutes to edit, I won't edit it. Because there's too much wrong with it. Maybe I'm not heavy on like kind of doing like Photoshop layers, and like if the exposure's way off by like 4 stops and it's sharp in all the wrong places, then I just won't try and correct it. I just kind of do a bit of colour manipulation, maybe a little bit of spot removal, because when you do street photography you'll find there's so much rubbish sometimes on the street and windows and stuff that can get in the way. But yeah, editing. Or post-processing. Editing is selecting images, post-processing a couple of minutes an image, max.
And you now have thousands and thousands of images. How do you go
60,000,
back?
yeah.
How do you go back and find a particular image? I mean, you remember one, but you can't remember the date.
Yeah, that's a question I ask myself very often, because my Lightroom cannot handle more than like 10,000 images at a time. I periodically go back through certain folders. So I'll go from start to finish like periodically every 6 months, maybe, and just see if there's any like hidden images in there. So like this one, where was it? Yeah, so I was doing a raw backup on the cloud, so every month I back up my raw files and my most precious images on the cloud, plus other hard drives and other data, so I've got like it in 3 or 4 locations, because I'm paranoid about hard drive failure, because I know there's 2 types of hard drives, those have failed and those haven't failed yet. So yeah, everyone's had a hard drive failure, so I'm paranoid about losing everything. I know so many people that's happened to. So anyway, I was doing a raw backup of this file, and then like I didn't even notice this one. It was like 2 shots after. I was like, oh, that could be cool. So I imported it, and then I was like, I didn't even see it up until like a month ago. So I'm sure there's like hundreds of images in there that could be worth looking at again. But you can always edit. You can always post-process and edit later on in your life. At the moment, I'm just concerned with shooting. And if I've got the images, and no one can take them away from me. So that's my focus. Shoot now, I can edit when I'm old and I can't walk the streets anymore and my knees are gone, so I'll have plenty of time to do it then.
Let's make some money though.
Yeah, absolutely. So I basically import the ones that kind of scream out to me that there's something. If I'm indifferent about it, I'll just leave it. There has to be something that jumps out at you. And one of the big mistakes is that people will try and edit their way out of a bad photo. And if the content in the image isn't that interesting or that good to start with, then you're kind of wasting your own time, really. Just pick what really jumps out to you, and those are probably your best images. Your gut feeling is normally right.
So, do you crop at all?
No, never crop my images. No. 2 reasons for that. One, technical. This is only 16 megapixels, so if I'm printing, say, 20 by 30, I'm really at the limit of what I can do with 16 megapixels. And 2, if I get in the habit of cropping my images, like, say, this was landscape, and I did a vertical crop of that, I think it's really lazy about photography. So I try and get it as right in camera as possible. I never, ever, I don't think any of my images are like a vertical or horizontal crop of the other orientation. I just wouldn't do it. If I wasn't happy with it, I'd probably go back to the scene and then try and reshoot it to get it in the correct orientation for that image. But to answer your question, no, I don't crop.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Do you have your own self-made presets that you just apply to your images, or do you take each image as unique and start from scratch in terms?
Yeah, I have like some colours that I kind of have built over time that give me the kind of look that I like. Because, as I said earlier, I find that digital cameras and digital camera lenses for street photography, they kind of the way they render images is so clinical and so sharp sometimes. It doesn't really accurately reflect like what the street is like. The street is a bit dirty, a bit gritty, and when you get this perfectly beautiful raw file out of your camera, that's not what the street is to me. So I prefer to kind of maybe distress it by bringing down the sharpness a little bit. Colour manipulation is something that I've worked on through experimentation, but I would just say don't go heavy on presets if you do buy them. There are film simulations out there, like Visco, I think is one that does like film simulations, and they're just very light looks, and maybe that could form the basis. So say like if you like Portrait 400, if you shoot film, which is a very common film stock, use that as your base, and then maybe experiment with the camera calibration or the colour sliders to maybe make the reds more prominent in your images, or change the hue of your oranges if the oranges are what you're drawn to. But don't try and reinvent the wheel, just keep it nice and simple. But yeah, I have some presets that I use that I've self-developed to speed up my workflow. So like, I always bring the clarity down by like -10, for instance, because I don't like really heavy, sharp images, which is unusual. Most people are sharpening up their images, but I prefer that kind of softer look because I just think it looks more nice when they're printed. And then the colours, of course. So yeah, it's just a workflow, saving time. And also when you import your images and you apply a preset that you've developed on import, you just get an immediate kind of yes or no, this works, this doesn't work. So it's worth doing. Any other questions?
I do have one, Mark.
Yeah.
I have a Chromebook as well. Do you ever use the web-based Lightroom, or do you ever edit through that, like out and about, or do you?
No, I never even use this. It's just like lying around. It's just my Windows keyboard.
Yeah.
Basically, I own technology that none of it works properly. Like my other camera, like the shutter button, doesn't work properly, and it like turns on and off by itself. Like this doesn't really work. The lens is a bit clunky. My main laptop that I use for editing, the keyboard doesn't work on it. So everywhere I walk around, I have to carry a separate keyboard and mouse. So I look like an idiot, and I didn't want to bring it here today with like. Saul would probably think I'm a bit crazy turning up with my own keyboard and mouse, so I just use that. And yeah, I use normal like what's the desktop version of Lightroom? 6, is it? I don't use the CC version. I'm not really a computer person. I'm trying to learn Adobe Premiere Pro at the moment for video, and that's like Lightroom times 10 in complexity. But yeah, I don't think I would use a Chromebook because that's pretty slow, isn't it? As far as computers go. So yeah, I would use a Lightroom on a good PC.
I could have like a very practical one, because you say you're printing a lot of them, so and you work with specific papers and stuff. But is there any option now, like for someone who would really love to print them a little bit better than on the standard, like showing this or something different? Because I'm new to London and I don't know all those like little places. Do you?
What is in companies?
Any like regular company?
Yeah, I would. Like good like commercial companies where they can kind of help you out and they've got good selections of paper and things like that. I would recommend Metro Imaging, that are based by near Farringdon area. They're really, really good. And they've got so many different papers, and if you go into reception, on the left above the films that they have in the fridge, they have like a wallet of all the different papers, and you can go in there, they have no issues with it, and just look through the different papers. So like if you want like a velvet look paper, they do a really nice one. They do all sorts of cool print processes that can look great and really enhance, like if you do black and white, they do some fantastic black and white print processes. Print Space is another one I would recommend. And I think those are the main two that are quite user friendly. There's lots of
friendly, aren't they?
Yeah, and there's lots of little like pro labs around, but those are the kind of ones that you have to have a relationship with. And if you're going in there, then maybe you're doing 10 or 15 proof prints and working with them to find a solution. And Print Space or Metro is maybe not the best place for that. There's also Bayou, just off Oxford Street, and that's I think they class themselves as London's only pro print lab or something. Bayou. So they're great for getting film developed as well if you shoot film. So they do C41 standard film, they also do like E6 and things like that, slide film and stuff, so they're a really good company. A lot of the pros use Bayou. So those are the big three. There's lots of little niche ones, but unless you're putting volume through them, it's probably hard to get the door open. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So yeah, thank you everyone for coming.